everyone. Thank you so much for attending the Video Marketing Study Group office hours today. I think this is our fourth or fifth session, so hopefully you're introduced to us by now, but let's go ahead and get started. So like I was just mentioning a few minutes ago, let us know who you are in the chat, where you're coming from, and if you have any questions, feel free to put that into the chat. We will answer all those questions towards the end of the presentation in a Q&A. But just to kind of introduce ourselves here, my name is Aaron Oberdick. I'm the multimedia specialist here at Nextiny Marketing.
And I'm Isabella Rodriguez. I'm the video marketing manager here at Nextiny.
Awesome. So before we get started, I do want to mention, go check out our last Hug event. It was last Thursday, so a week from today. We were talking about measuring the success of your video marketing efforts. So we go a lot in detail talking about different analytics that you should kind of be focusing on when tracking your success through video. So definitely go check that out. We also cover a lot more in detail of the state of video marketing in 2021. So it's highly valuable. We're going to drop a link down in the chat now so you can have a direct link to that. But we highly encourage you to rewatch that if you didn't attend last week. All right, jumping into the agenda today. First, we're going to talk about some marketing stats and analytics. So kind of just doing a surface level retouch of what we talked about last week, talking a little bit about that Video Marketing 2021 report that was conducted by HubSpot there. And then we're going to kind of transition over and get started talking about webinars. So we've had a lot of questions in the study group, how to get started with webinars, how do you gauge success with webinars? So we're going to do a deep dive into webinars and how you can get started creating a webinar series. Then we're going to kind of hop over to some study group questions that we've had throughout the week in the study group, and then wrap it up, like I mentioned, with a Q&A. So we're going to hop into first the State of Video Marketing report. I'll hand it over to Isabella to talk about this part here.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, so like Aaron mentioned, we gathered some stats between HubSpot and WiseOwl State of Video Marketing Survey 2021. So we wanted to throw these in to give you guys a deeper understanding of video's impact in marketing and sales efforts as is right now. So here we have a graph that's showing the increase of businesses using video as a marketing tool. You can see that in years like 2016 or 2017, this was at about 61 to 63%. But now you'll see that this has had a steady increase over the years. So this year being at 86%. So that's a 41% increase since 2016. So in this graph, you'll find data showing businesses that reported video being an important part of their marketing strategy. So there's also a pretty steady incline here over the last 5 to 6 years. This year alone, 93% of marketers who use video have indicated that it was, in fact, an important part of their strategy. Now, in this graph, so as we're conducting this webinar right now, we can confidently say that this graph accurately reflects our pivot to webinars for live events as well. And we know a lot of companies felt the same way and had to kind of get on board with webinars, adapt it into their models. So webinars were the video success story of 2020. During 2020, just 46% of businesses used webinars, but in 2021, this rose significantly to 62%. So 91% of these marketers say that these webinars have been a success. So that ended up making it the most effective video marketing channel of all in the survey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to piggyback off of that, talking a little bit about the analytics there. As Isabella mentioned, webinars were the video success story of 2020 and 2021. And it's very relevant because you can see here's a study group question we just got asked this past week. Do you believe the webinar is a form of video marketing? And obviously directly from those stats, the answer is yes. So I do want to kind of just talk about a little bit more in detail how you can get started creating your own webinar series and how you can create success with that. So hopping over to the next slide here. How do you get started with a webinar series, right? You know, there's a lot when it comes to this in creation, execution, and then post production. So, where do you start? Where do you begin? And the first thing that we've kind of determined is that you really want to determine your goals and understand the values your webinar is going to bring, right? So, first off, what are you trying to achieve with your webinar? What are you trying to get? Is there a message you want to get across? And how do you want people to react to your webinar? So, do you want them to take some sort of action upon something? Are you trying to convert them into a client or customer? Definitely just try to figure out your end goals before starting to implement your strategy. And then really understand the value that you're offering. So, typically try to find one topic that you're going to talk to that's more overarching. And then you can kind of create each webinar that's more intricate and more detailed about that specific topic. So definitely figure out your goals first before you start diving into that strategy. And then once you kind of have all of that implemented and created, you know what you're going to start your webinars about, then start to bring awareness to your audience through promotion, right? So you can promote through all of your different channels, your social media channels, email channels, whatever channel really just communicates with people that could be your target audience. Go ahead and send that over. And also don't be afraid to promote a video with video, right? So promote your webinars with a pre-recorded video. You can create a short promotional video to really explain what your webinar is going to cover, and then invite them to register right then and there. Also, and that's really important because then you can give them directly a CTA that will link straight to the registration page. So definitely don't be afraid to promote your webinar series with video. Now, hopping over to more of the technical aspect of what we're going to talk about for webinars. First things first is have a steady connection, right? So, before you even begin, if you don't have a steady internet connection, you're going to lag a lot. You might have a lot of audio that doesn't go through and doesn't get kind of said to the person viewing. So, always make sure that you have a steady internet connection. Making sure that you're home and secure. I put hardwired there as well, just because that's something I kind of reminded myself to do for this webinar. If you have an Ethernet port on your computer, you can also take advantage of that and just make sure that you're directly connected, so you're not going to have any like frame drops or anything. Second, you want to clear kind of a dedicated space to present with the clean frame. So, you don't want anything with too much clutter in the background, nothing distracting. Just make sure that it's nice and clean and there's nothing that's obstructing your view. Then next, your camera, your microphone, your lighting, really just talking about how to optimize that in the best way possible. So currently I'm using my webcam. A lot of people will own a DSLR or mirrorless or just a digital camera. And typically those cameras can output video at a higher quality than your webcam. So this is a really viable solution for a higher quality video when you're doing your webinars. You can get what's called a capture device, and typically you can connect that capture device to your camera and then convert it into almost like a webcam. So that is one way to improve the video quality of your webinars. Jumping into the audio part, I'm using a dedicated microphone. It's a USB plugin. So the audio difference is pretty recognizable when you unplug that, and you can hear kind of all the filtered air around the space versus when you have a USB microphone that's just directly plugged in. It's very directional, and so it won't pick up a lot of extra audio sources. And then lighting, you don't have to go out and pick up any LED panels or anything. You don't have to create a whole video studio in your living room. The biggest thing to just know is always try to find your light source and place it in front of you. So this is kind of in conjunction with keeping a dedicated space to present. If you find a nice clean frame and everything, and your backdrop is nice, but your light source is also behind you, then it's irrelevant because you'll become a silhouette in the video. You always want to make sure that light source is in front of you rather than behind you, so that you're nice and well lit and people can see you really well. Moving forward, talking about pre-recording the event. So this is going to be crucial when it comes to assets and after the fact when the event is over. So speaking on that, attendees will register for your event, but you'll notice the attendee registration number versus the people that actually attended your event is going to be quite different. So always make sure you pre-record that event, because a lot of people are going to register and then they'll have a scheduling conflict, or they'll double schedule, or even just forget your event's happening. And then after the fact, they'll say, oh no, I missed that event. But if you pre-record that and provide that as an asset, of course, they're then able to rewatch that and then be educated or get everything that you're speaking on in that particular episode of your webinar series. Next, talking about a waiting room slide. So this is going to just kind of pertain to when you're getting everything set up beforehand. You can have a slide that basically just plays music with your title slide, and have everyone sit in a waiting room watching that, rather than watching the technical stuff happening in the background. This is also really important for when you have multiple speakers. Sometimes they don't all mute their microphones, so there might be a little bit of noise happening right before the event happens. So having this kind of waiting room slide to have everyone just kind of on and the same page and watching that is a really good technical feature. And then last, talking a little bit about softwares to use. There's plenty of softwares out there for different webinars you can do. We're currently using Bevy through the HubSpot platform, but we also have used Zoom webinars. There's plenty of opportunities to research and figure out kind of what the best software is for your particular needs when creating this webinar series. So just be on the lookout for that. Now, moving over to a few frequently asked questions that we get about the webinars in general. So how do I come up with my idea for the webinar? Where do I begin, right? And I kind of throw that question right back to the person asking that, because what are you subject of profession on? You're going to be professional in some area, so make sure that your webinar kind of speaks to what you know and what you're knowledgeable about, right? Begin with, let's say, we are a video team, so we do webinars about video. Whatever you do, take that kind of overarching subject, and then you can, like I said, break it down into more intricate details for each episode, but always stay on the subject that you're kind of relevant and professional in. Now, second question, how do I measure success from my webinars? And this alludes to the first slide on the webinar. And this is a long-term success effort. So you're not going to record one webinar and immediately look at the analytics right after and determine that it was successful. It is a long-term effort success, and you'll see that down the road as you develop. So it's more, again, I was saying how you're going to see a big influx of people will register for your event, but then your number of actual attendees might fluctuate a lot on that. And so when you go to it, you might determine my percentage is rather low, but that's where those assets come in. That's where you record your event, or you create your presentation into a PDF, and you're able to share those assets with all the people that wasn't able to make it. Then they start making that association that, hey, maybe I can watch this webinar kind of on my time. And then, to kind of take it from there. Once they determine, hey, I can watch all of these webinars, get a lot of valuable information. Now I have questions. So then they're going to actually want to attend your event and then ask questions while presenting. So the ball basically starts tumbling, and then it's a long-term effort. You kind of start to gather all of your analytics after, a 6-month phase, a 9-month phase. And that's really where you can start to dive into the analytics and determine how you can better your webinar series to make it successful. What can I do to improve the quality of my webinar? The next question. That's going to kind of just jumping back and alluding to the video, audio, lighting bullet point of last slide. We were talking about how you can plug in a digital camera to use as your webcam, or using that USB microphone. That's going to just technically make it a lot better, make it visually better, make it sound better, just kind of give it that better improvement overall. And then the last question, what do I do when I'm finished with a webinar? So of course, there's tons of things you can do. The biggest thing is just promoting it. So making sure that people are aware of it, and bringing awareness to that. So one note that I had in a previous slide was creating kind of a brand around your webinar series. And that goes back to taking one subject that you're the professional on, and then speaking kind of at length about that. And then you kind of create with that your brand of your webinar series. people will then be attracted to that brand and be more enticed to watch something with a name, with specific colors. And you can see, same with office hours. It started as just kind of our singular webinar, but then as it became reoccurring, it has the brand of office hours now. So always try to find that branding opportunity when you start to create the series, and it'll make a much larger impact. All right. So now that we talked a little bit about webinars in length, if you guys do have any questions about webinars, please drop them into the chat. And like I said, Isabella and I will tackle those Q&A towards the end of the presentation here. But I want to jump into some study group questions. I really like to touch on these every other week as we do these presentations, because it's great to answer them in the actual study group. But I feel like when you get it on video, it just means a little bit more. So the first question we're going to talk about is, can I combine footage from an iPhone and Android when editing? And the short answer is absolutely yes. You can do that. It's basically the same exact concept as if you take a Canon camera and a Sony camera and you record footage, let's say, of the same thing on both of those cameras. You can pop that into an editing software and edit those together, mix and match clips, and you'll have no issues. The one thing you might see slight variations on is the codec. And that gets a little bit more technical. We'll keep it a little bit surface level. But what that does is it might say that a particular shade of reds and oranges, yellows, like your warm colors or your cold colors, your blues, your purples, and things like that, they might have just slight variations in the way that they're projected on your screen. So, a red from an iPhone might not match the exact hex color red from an Android. So, be aware of that, but it is getting a little bit granular. And if you are creating something to just kind of send over to a client or something short and sweet, yes, you can combine iPhone and Android footage. It won't be a problem. Now, moving over to the next question, I created a brand video, but I'm getting low views on it. So how can I improve this overall? And we put together some bullet points on really how you can kind of improve that play rate, improve your engagement overall with just generally all videos, right? So the first bullet point is really just keep your content concise and clear, right? If your brand video is 10 minutes, you're probably seeing a lot of drop off because people aren't keeping that retention and they're not focused because you're probably talking about a ton of different things. So make sure that you really kind of take all of your information and combine it into a concise and clear message when reporting that video. Second, fulfill your audience's expectations. So they're obviously on your website or watching your video for a reason. They're looking to understand maybe what your brand is all about. So really fulfill the audience's expectations and answer all of their questions in that video. Make sure that they're not walking away after watching your video and questioning what your brand is still trying to achieve or anything. Really just make sure that they understand 100% what you're aiming at. Then share your video with your audience through social media channels, right? Your communication channels like email. Definitely share it to your relevant audience, your target audience. And if they view it and they really like it, they're going to be more inclined to share it down the road as well. Then pay attention to your average engagement, right? So if you're not familiar with the analytics of engagement, you can see a lot of these stats on the number of video platforms that you use. But average engagement basically takes all of the viewers that watched your video and combines the time that they watched it and pushes it into an engagement chart. So your average engagement is really telling because there might be a particular spot in a video where you're seeing a lot of drop off in that video. So go to the analytics and check it out. There might be a technical problem with the video where it just stops playing on that particular spot. Or, I know there was one issue one time that we had where there was like 3 seconds of black in a video and people were thinking that the video was broken or something. So they were just Xing out and not watching the rest of it. And so that was a big issue. You can always go back and maybe pinpoint a location or a reason why people are dropping off in a video with average engagement. Next one, increase the size of your video embed. So maybe people are coming to your homepage and your brand video is on the very bottom in the footer. people might not scroll that far, or people might not see it because it might be small. So you can always kind of change the location of your video on the page to be more front and center, or increase the size of your video embed to just be more relevant on the page so people see it. And then if your video is on a web page with copy, always make sure that that copy is complementing it and making sure that it's relevant to the video. And then last, if it's not, always explore the option of just moving that video to a more relevant location. So even if it is relevant information, the video and the text match each other, but you're still not getting a lot of hits, it might be because that page just is generally not getting visited enough. So maybe just try to move it to a more visited page that still keeps it relevant so you get more hits on that video. And with that being said, I do want to remind you guys that we did at Hug last week. We talked about 7 analytics in particular, and we go in depth about each analytic, what you should be doing to improve it, what you should be doing to avoid, to not hinder anything there. And then we also had several other subjects. We have case studies on the analysis of videos. So I would highly recommend checking out the Measuring the Success of Our Video Marketing Efforts Hug that we did last week. Now, moving along here, the last question we had in the study group that I found really interesting, and it kind of pertains to this week, was about drones. And we've talked about drones a little bit in office hours before. I want to say about a month ago, we had DJI had a new release on a drone that we talked about. But this person asks, flying a drone is difficult. So what do I need to know before getting one? And it says there, it seems difficult, and it does seem difficult. It's a little bit daunting at first because it's obviously new technology, but I kind of wanted to just bring down the worriness of why people are so scared to fly drones, because they genuinely are not difficult to fly once you get a grasp of it. So going in, piloting a drone specifically for video, right? And I'm going to do a direct comparison of a generic drone. And I put DJI Mini and above there, but it's not just DJI. There are other brands out there that have drones that kind of have the same features. I would say look at this more of a perspective from more of like a toy drone that you can pick up for pretty cheap at any sort of hobby shop versus a drone that's more specifically created for video creation. So generic drones, they don't have GPS or they don't have GLONASS to lock positioning. And basically what that does is just it locates, everyone knows kind of what GPS is. It's approximate location of where your device is, in this case, a drone. So on the DJI products and other products there, you have GPS and GLONASS locked in for positioning. So what this basically means is if I have a cheap generic drone and I push up on the stick, it's going to go up. And if I let go of that stick, gravity is going to pull it back down. But with a more expensive drone or something that's more prevalent to video, when you push up on the stick, it'll go up. But when you let go, it's going to hover in its exact location because it's GPS and GLONASS locked in as its position. So you can actually just set the controller down, walk away. It's going to hover in its exact positioning. So back over to the generic drones, there's not going to be any sensors. And as I was just saying, it'll drop in elevation due to gravity if you're not continuously maintaining that throttle, to where the DJI products, they're going to have offsetting sensors to stabilize while you're hovering. The generic drone, there's no collision avoidance sensors typically. If there are, they're not usually that good, to where a lot of the video drones now have omnidirectional sensors for collision avoidance. So what this means is you're flying it straight at a wall at 50 miles an hour because you're recording someone close to a wall. That drone will recognize that and come to a stop before it actually smacks right into the wall. So it recognizes all of those obstacles and will stop and make sure that it's avoiding all of those things, so you don't collide into something. And then last, there's usually no features that are relevant to video in these generic drones. So they're a lot harder to fly and they just don't have a lot of advantage for video. But video drones specifically typically have a lot of features. So the DJI one specifically, they have a feature called Active Track. And basically, when you're looking at what the camera's looking at from your controller, you can just simply tap on anybody that's moving around and the drone will automatically detect that and follow them. So some really, really awesome new automated features that are kind of coming out with the video drones today. So hopefully this kind of gives just a small idea of the easefulness of flying a drone for video versus more of those cheaper, smaller drones that aren't really pertained for video. And I highly encourage everyone to definitely try it out because you'll see with 5 to 10 minutes of usage, it's a lot more comfortable to use. So speaking on drones, I just did want to talk about that and DJI because it's a little bit relevant in today's new releases, which is what we're going to jump to next. And DJI released two new products over the past 2 weeks that I just want to touch on very briefly here. The DJI Ronin 4D is that first product, and it's definitely not for entry level. It is very much a high end, more cinematic camera. It's a fully integrated camera and stabilizer. So if you remember about a month ago in our last office hours, we talked about a stabilizer that allows you to put your phone into it and record phone with nice stabilized footage. This is basically the same concept, but with an actual cinema camera with cinematic imaging. So it's also based not so much on a 3-axis stabilization, but 4-axis stabilization. So it's even more steady than any of the stabilizers currently out there. But the coolest feature of this is going to be LiDAR focusing. Um, LiDAR is a light detection. And what it basically does is it measures using light the distance from wherever you're sending the LiDAR signal to the ground or to an object that's close to you. So what it'll do is the LiDAR will then always be bouncing a signal back and forth from the camera to the subject to keep that subject autofocused. And it's a brand new technology that cameras are now kind of implementing into this autofocus feature. So it's just super unique and really interesting. I'm excited to see where autofocus kind of goes in the future with video. And then the other product launch that DJI did was the DJI Action 2. This is very similar to just a GoPro, but this is going to be much more on the inexpensive end for cameras. The really coolest feature of it, you can see just from the picture there, they're tiny little cubes. They just snap to each other. They're very magnetic. So you can snap your little LED screen to the top. You can add other cameras, more batteries to it, and it becomes completely modular. So it's a 4K camera, records up to 120 frames. So you can do slow-mo with it if you want. It's got a nice wide 155-degree field of view. So you can capture kind of everything in the field of view. And then last, it does have built-in internal stabilization. So action cams have kind of taken a really big jump in the past year or two where they've implemented stabilization directly into the lens. And so, if you do something that's just maybe a lot of bouncing around, you won't necessarily see that in the finalized video that you record. So two really interesting features or two new product launches by DJI that just kind of seem very interesting. And on these two slides, the titles will link directly to the page. So with the PDF after this presentation, you can just click right on those links and then check out these a little more if you're interested. And then the last thing I want to cover for office hours today is going to be just a new release by DJI. It's the third release that they're doing in 2 weeks. They did 2 ground cameras, so I'm going to go ahead and assume this is going to be a drone, but I just wanted to mention it because it is tonight. So if you're very interested in just seeing kind of the new technology that's going to be released by DJI via drones, definitely check out the new product announcement that's going to happen tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern time. So whatever time frame that is for you, just make sure you kind of conduct that timing. But that being said, that concludes our office hours for this week. So let me check the chat here. I haven't been poking in to see if there's any questions, but
Yes, it looks like we have a few questions. There's one here from Barry that I was typing out an answer, but I figured it's going to be easier if we can just go ahead and explain it live. I don't know if you want to read that one, Aaron.
yeah, sure. Let's see.
But essentially, Barry says, I'm toying with the idea of producing a 5-minute brand video that combines me reading from my teleprompter and a second video window containing a video scribe that supports my script. Think of Bill Maher's New Rules format. His tools include Canon 5D, which is great, Logitech StreamCam, Pinnacle HD, green screen, and he wants to know if we have any comments or cautions on that.
No, that's a great start there. So Canon 5D right off the bat, that's a great camera to use. We actually used to use the 5D when I started at Nextiny before we kind of switched over to the Sony. But Canon is a very viable solution for your video camera. The Logitech Stream Cam, that's going to just be your device to be able to kind of switch back and forth. So that's going to be great too. Pinnacle HD, that's your software. I don't have a lot of experience with Pinnacle, but I do know people that speak very highly of it. So absolutely, by all means, that'll work. No problem. Green screen, that's just depending on exactly what you're trying to achieve, right? So if you can't find a nice clean background, or depending on what you're presenting as well, right? If you're talking about things at the ocean, maybe you want an ocean in the backdrop, and so a green screen would be perfect for that scenario. But um, you know, also you could potentially explore that option of a nice clean background. But if you need something to be green screened, obviously go for it. And
Um,
then,
I would just add to that, if you have the green screen, definitely, especially if you're trying to accomplish like that Bill Maher setup. I mean, I think for the most part, his background's probably like city lights or something, the typical talk show backdrop.
yeah.
But I think just keeping in mind, you want it to be something pretty clutter free, something on the neutral side, especially if you're going to be having this video overlay,
Mhm.
whether it be captions or photos, whatever you're going to be presenting, because you don't want it to be too busy in the final product. So keeping your setup pretty clean for the most part. And I would say, if anything of any cautions, if you're using a teleprompter, sometimes it takes a little bit to get used to or find the right speed.
Yeah.
We had some trial and error with that with Gabriel, and I'm sure he's laughing on his end of the screen here, because just making sure you're getting it. You're not speaking too fast, too slowly. So finding that right rhythm, if you're recording by yourself, especially, can take a little more time. Once you get it, I would say get that recording of just you, and then go into Pinnacle, overlay that video. If it's one video that you're overlaying, that it's just a scribe that you can have playing to that same duration. Let's say your recording takes 10 minutes. You time that second, overlay to be 10 minutes as well. So you don't have to do too much work in the editing room. Or if it's like individual assets, just bringing them in. That would probably be the best way to go. It just depends on what you're overlaying here. But
Right.
Aaron, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then just one last thing I want to say is, if you're using that green screen and you're putting an artificial backdrop for you, always make sure that your lighting is concise, because it's so important to make sure that your lighting is kind of even along that green screen, because what happens is people will put a green screen without any lighting. And so obviously with one light source coming in, if they're standing in front of it, they might be shading a part of the backdrop. And what happens is, when you go into your editing software and try to key out all that green, there's different hues of green. And so you start to key out more hues and more hues. And then you might see that part of your own body, or like, your eyes or something, start to be keyed out as well. So always make sure that your lighting is on point when doing green screen work.
I saw that you just put in here, Barry, eye contact with my audience is number one priority. That's definitely another thing, depending on where you're placing your teleprompter and your camera. If you are recording with your Canon, there's different rigs. It depends on your teleprompter. For example, the one that we have in the office was one that we could rig directly onto our camera. So it keeps that natural eye level,
Yeah.
because that reflection that we're reading is directly straight ahead. And it's not as distracting as looking directly into the camera lens as well. So it just depends. If you don't have one that's mounted directly onto it, I would just say trying to keep that as close as possible, whether it's just above it or just below it, and doing a practice run to see, how your eyes are looking in that final recording, because it might be that they're too low or something, or it might be too obvious that you're reading. If that's the case, you might want to take a little half step back, whatever it might be, just finding that right adjustment there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if eye contact is genuinely your highest priority, I would go with something that's going to overlay atop the lens, because we have seen with that cell phone style teleprompter that's just slightly under the lens, you can still see slight variations of eye movement. So any
Yeah.
videographer out there that's watching your video is going to immediately notice that. Obviously, just the generic viewer might not notice that, but if it is your number one priority, I would highly recommend that. And I see you put the Glide Gear Pro setup. Isabella, correct me if I'm wrong. I
I think they're
believe
cards. Yep.
that's exactly what we used when in office. So That's a great solution for teleprompters. All right.
And then I believe Gabriel asked as well about, and Barry, let us know if you have any other questions, by the
Yes,
way, or
please.
you can always drop it into the study group. We'd be happy to continue helping you in your setup.
Absolutely.
Gabriel also asked, do you recommend going back to events, do you recommend turning the events into other kinds of content? How can that help?
Oh, absolutely. So obviously you can kind of recycle your content. So if we're doing a webinar series, this is a great example. So for office hours, what we'll do is we'll go back, we'll rewatch the recording, and then we'll create a blog from all of our slides or presentations from this. And then that way people have almost this webinar series in a text format, not verbatim word for word, but it's more of an overview on what we spoke upon and then more bullet points about webinar series. So you can repurpose content. Absolutely. That's not just a blog format. You can take this and turn it into a podcast as well by pulling just the audio and then giving it more formats to be in. So just making it more available for people to view or listen to as well. So definitely repurposing content is a huge factor when creating these series. All right. I see Stephanie said she definitely needs collision insurance for her drone. So I highly recommend it. I've done a few tests flying drones at walls just to see if it actually works, and it does. So trees work as well. So
Scary business.
awesome. I don't see any other questions. So yeah, if anyone does have additional questions, if you don't think of it right now, but down the road, feel free to hop into the study group and put those questions. We're always in there. We're active there. So we'll definitely answer them there. Oh, I see Stephanie just popped into the chat one more time. Do you need any special permits for drones? So that's a great question, Stephanie. If you're flying for, so how do I word this? If you're flying for the purpose of profiting directly with someone, like you're creating a video that will make money, right? Then you do need a permit, and it's not so much, well, it's more of a license than a permit, right? So it's called Part 107. It's directly on the what when I look for the FAA link.
FAA, yeah.
Yeah. So it's man, I'm having a the Aeronautical Administration, right?
Yes.
What am I thinking of? The FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority. There we go. Thank you, Barry. So the FAA, and this is, by the way, this is United States specific, because I know Barry is in Toronto, but United States specifically, you have to have what's called a Part 107 registration, and that requires you studying up and going to an airport location to take the test. It's a relatively easy test after studying, and I think it's only about 40 to 50 questions. But once you pass that, then you're licensed to operate your drone within the United States and fly for creating videos with purpose to create revenue. That being said, if you're just flying for fun or you're creating your own brand video, your intention is to just kind of bring more attention to yourself and your brand, then you don't necessarily need that Part 107 to fly. It's more of if you're doing direct client work and you're working with a third party to create revenue with that source.
Right. Any commercial use of that footage, essentially, you should be a licensed drone pilot in order to acquire that. And also there are location permits technically. It's just broken up by airspace instead. So that just really depends. There's an actual airspace map that you can access when you have your drone, and you can see what's off limits, if you need special permission for certain areas. If you're flying near an airport, for example, those are things that need to be cleared.
Mm-hmm.
So always want to double check where you're going to be flying, where you're going to be capturing footage of. For example, in Sarasota, we ran into that a lot because a lot of things happen to be close to the Sarasota airport. So it's just making sure that things are cleared for our own access to get that footage.
Absolutely. And just speaking directly to our Canadian viewers, it is different in Canada. So don't take that and run with it in Canada, because I know the laws are a lot more strict. and a little bit more difficult to get your drone up into the air. So I would advise checking out the Canadian equivalent of the FAA here in the US to just make sure that you're up and running on all of their regulations and laws with that. I also see Gabriel in the chat dropped our blog. We do have a blog on how to get your Part 107. So if you are interested, definitely check out that blog for future reference. All right. Well, I think that being said, guys, we appreciate everyone coming to the office hours. Again, more questions, feel free to hop over to the study group and throw them in there. And we're active. We'll be answering them there throughout the week. Our next office hours is in 2 weeks from now. So make sure you register for that as well. Sign up for that, and we'll see you then.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining.
All right. Talk to you later, everybody. Bye.